Yeah, I forgot what my point was.
My fear. Did you share the DOT's opinion?
I did not generate it.
So just to address the question you asked, is it addressed in this? This is the DOT position, and that's on current law, not the proposed changes. And where they indicate that any action would cause the loss of all 16 years of the funds. In this case, different from what the standard is on the zero fair requirement. And they point some language in the statute to make that point. So I just want to make that point clear. This is their interpretation of existing law.
Okay, so I read this maybe a little differently than what you read it. I don't know, but I also went back onto the DOT site for eligibility requirements. And one of the bullet points in there is certify annually that the agency has maintained its local sales tax authority for transit at or above January 1, 2022 levels. I would agree that if we were to basically repeal it, that would then violate this particular piece. But if we are not to take it, we're still at the January 2022 level. Even if we were to suspend taking it for the next couple of years or whatever it may be. That would be my contention. The other piece that I want to kind of point around is we're kind of getting wrapped around the axles on this grant. It just came about, which is a new funding source. And I just kind of scrolled out some quick math here over the next 16 years, and I really use some conservative numbers. I'm looking at the 1.7% of the 1.46 billion that is actually going into this particular transit program. And I come up with about $23.8 million potentially to link, just based upon those numbers of what we currently are receiving out of that grant amount, which is about 1.7%. Additionally, what I went ahead and did is I looked at just conservatively at $4 million on the 1% that we would be taking from the taxpayers. Yeah, over the next 16 years. So we're basically asking our taxpayers to pay to link $64 million so we can receive a $23 million grant. And that gives me concern when we're asking our taxpayers to pay basically 3 times to make up the other 25 cents, out of the dollar. And so with that particular piece, I have great concern about the fact that I think we've lost sight of what we truly are trying to do here. I want to go back to what Mr. Tidd made the comment. I agree that we need to move forward, but we're looking at a plan that initially was developed in 2020 and 2015. There's been a lot that has happened over the last 9 years, and with the implementation and the lack thereof in a lot of areas. And with a new CEO coming in the organization, perhaps looking at a different direction, or even going back and revisiting what is feasible and what is possible once we know, especially with the new labor agreements over the next 6 months, but that may reveal. And so for me, when we look at this, it's about making the wisest decision with regards to what the future of the organization holds, whether it's a suspension of, to give us the time to take a look at and see what we may be able to do with existing staff to improve, upon the system, and or taking a look at what that labor pool may reveal because of the increase in salaries and so forth. And so for that particular reason, I look at this and I really have a hard time, asking the citizens to pay 75 cents of the dollar right now, when realistically, just looking at what they even have on their website doesn't hold true. And the way that I read this, it doesn't say that we would potentially lose it, because we would still be at the level that we were at on January 1, 2022, which we have the eligibility, but we weren't taking it then, and we're not taking it now. So that would be, the points that I would make.
Any other comments? And
Isn't the difference that if we continue to defer, we will not be eligible for grants and we also won't be taking the taxation? So it'll just be loss of both funding sources rather than one or the other. It's not getting both.
So I would answer that question, it's not grants plural, grant one, which is this transportation support grant, which ideally was actually to offset costs. The original thought process behind it was to ensure that citizens that were under the age of 18 actually had free transit. That's really what the whole idea was. It now was they'll compensate back for that period. That was the original idea behind it. And it has morphed into something else. And it has also morphed of the legislature trying to hold local authorities hostage in regards to that, waving the carrot, but hitting us with a stick saying, if you want the carrot, you get this. So.
Mark,
But a couple of twists on the different perspectives. Mayor Fletcher and I were chit-chatting there a little bit, and it is true that things have dramatically changed. Pandemics tend to do that, apparently. And yet, when we sit, just in the finance committee, we're looking at, and we have proposals here of the expansion of the rideshare program, which really wasn't even considered back then. So it's kind of this other phase of transit that we're doing. And providing service. We heard from Mayor Agnew in the committee on potential capital upgrades at the ops base and here. Those cost money. So I think the budget process is a good time to do the plan. What is the revision to the plan? The last thing I'd say is this kind of procedure. We have nothing before us, and I don't know why we're spending so much time as an extension of the March workshop. There is no resolution before us. And the soonest one could be prepared would be the May meeting. And I'm kind of getting tired of the topic.
any other comments? Mayor Agnew?
I would point out one big difference between now and 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Our budget then was 3 years ago, what, $19 million? As we all know, Link got a massive ton of influx of money unexpectedly over the COVID period. Our budget for this year was 31 million. Not sure we need that second tenth right now. I'm not saying give it away forever, but delaying it when we don't really have a use for it. I mean, I'm sure we could spend it if we got it, but we don't need to spend it right now.
My thing. It doesn't, this isn't necessarily either way, but in this state. With this legislation, we, the citizen, are getting tax fatigue. I mean, we're getting hammered from every which way. It might benefit Link for the carbon tax, but right now we're paying, as a citizen, we're paying the second highest, fuel tax in the nation. And now we're paying roughly nominally around 50 cents a gallon for a hidden carbon tax, just buying fuel. I mean, every taxing district is wanting more money. Olympia is stealing more money out of our pocketbook. The citizen is getting taxed to death in this state, so there's a balance somewhere, but there's definitely tax fatigue, and we haven't even seen the worst of it. It's out of this legislation, it's just gonna keep going up and up and up. I mean, people gotta live and survive. Inflation, taxes are getting out of control.
Mayor Fletcher?
Well, I think I need a split personality on this too. I've got philosophies on both sides of it. One side of me says, government should never have all the money at once. It's got to be efficient, look for priorities. On the other hand, this is money that is, somebody in Olympia fought for. There's an Olympic game going on behind the scenes that ties all of the transit funding together. So if we take some transit funding and say, oh, no, we don't want this, but we'd rather have a whole bunch of transit funding over here. How does that play? How does that actually get us money to finish the loop? How does it get us money to do all the other road projects that we all want in our cities? If we throw this back at them and say, no, we don't want that. But yet at the same time, we've got these other things. Yes, we can do or should do or save it, or, you know, it's kind of a no-win situation. So you're kind of coming down to that. If we keep this money, we really need a new game plan. The old one's gone. Life changed. We really have to show the citizen between now and the end of the year that this money is gonna go for expanding services that are comparable or better than what they voted for. Otherwise, I agree, we're taxing them for, you know, we're taxing it for more than what we're gonna gain out of the other funding. So, you know, economic wise, you know, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. So they're gonna give me a headache here. Yeah, that doesn't answer my own question, but the scenario I guess I'm looking for is if we were to vote today is to continue this. And DOT comes back and says, okay, you're gonna drive the game, send it and go back to where we are today. I mean, if we can't, then there is no question. We're stuck with what DOT is gonna do.
Well,
Right.
and
Go ahead.
to address some procedural issues. So, council member Ulof is correct, we don't have a drafted resolution, before us. You can certainly craft one, during session if you so desire. The timing of the communication to the Department of Revenue, does not have to happen until around September, right, before the final quarter. So in that respect, you have some time, because right now you are deferring, that resolution is good through the end of this year. So the deferral will continue through the end of this year, unless you take some additional action. That the deadline for that action is at your September meeting. So you do have some time. Complicating that is the pending bill. And so I did just want to point that timeline out to folks, so you're appropriately considering the
But with the
options.
pending bill, if we were to try to do something to beat the gun,
I certainly.
could that be rescinded at a later date?
Could you rescind the resolution potentially? Certainly, this is a public meeting, so everything we talk about is a matter of public record, that would be admissible in any future proceeding. If you did enact a resolution today or at the next board meeting, and then subsequently the legislature changed the language, you could rescind that resolution. Again, we don't have to communicate until to the Department of Revenue until September or beginning of October.
Although I think that the caveat is existing language says any action
Yeah.
to reduce authority causes you to lose the money. So taking the action causes loss, and what DOT is saying, that's DOT's interpretation, I'm trying to be respectful of that, is that you lose the money all 16 years of it. That's the point. And their estimate is 29 million, 23, but it's a fraction of what the 4.7 is. I mean, you're not wrong, but Ann's correct as well. It's both of them being lost to the budget strain. So we're talking about a much bigger impact if that happens. This is the position they're taking on this. Any action we would take is an action. I mean, I think that's the language problem of doing something. It says if you take the action, you lose the funds, and that's existing law.
That's their interpretation, sorry.
Joyce,
Okay. There was a question asked that I would really like to hear the answer to, and Commissioner Steinberg is the one who addressed it. Is it possible that if we were to allow the 1/10% to go into effect, can those funds be specifically earmarked for expansion and anything associated with that? As opposed to going into the general fund, even though we've made the commitment to make the expansion. I mean, that's what the voters, I'm not in favor of doing away with it or delaying it any further, because there are costs that are going to be involved with any expansion that we choose to do that is outside of salaries, the obvious ones. There are other costs that are involved, and that would help make sure that we have the funds available to do that. So, Counselor, Can you answer that question?
Well, you're gonna get a typical attorney answer. It's a little waffly, but what I can tell you absolutely is you do already have bumpers on this money, and those bumpers were what the voters approved, right? With the language of the ballot measure that the voters approved, so.
So that's a restriction we have.
That's a restriction you have. Now, that ballot measure was fairly broad, to give you a lot of flexibility and leeway in how you use those funds. The question that I'm not gonna be able to provide you an answer to today is if you created greater restrictions on the use of those funds than the ballot measure, anticipated, whether or not that's something that you could do.
And can I remind everyone that the ballot already had a provision in?
Yeah.
That 20% of the money has to be spent on elderly and disabled transportation services, 55% for expansion of fixed route, 25% for various capital projects the board approved. That was in the flyer that went to everybody. That's part of the ballot language you guys approved. It's already restricted. We already said it's going to go for those purposes.
So
Vote-
basically,
vote chance.
that's the answer to Commissioner Steinberg's.
Yes, yeah, I mean,
I
that's
just
why
want
I've been treating it. It's
clarification on it.
restricted because it was in what we sold the voters. We said
I
that's what
like
the money goes
Mark
to.
over here.
But to further.
You're right, until the resolutions that have been of us, let's stop.
Well, I don't want to belittle the discussion because I think it's important discussion. So,
It is, but
Mayor,
I just have one last question. You said we don't have to notify until September, our decision or whatever.
Yeah, so the Department of Revenue needs to know by the final quarter, what they need to collect.
So we don't actually have to do anything.
Right, well, hold on, I'm not done. That's good until this law goes into effect.
Yeah.
So right now, there isn't a window of opportunity that's gonna close, assuming that passes, as soon as that passes. That's one, right? Correct me if I'm
Well,
wrong.
I don't know that I would use it as a window of opportunity. Right now, there's a question whether the
That's what I'm calling it.
interpretation, yeah.
There's a question right now, as soon as this passes, there is no.
As soon as this passes, there is no question.
Right. And
Commissioner Gary.
I feel like Mayor Fletcher really torn, because I understand that we all represent the constituents and the amount of taxes that we're paying is crazy and not easy to stomach. At the same time, we represent Link and also need to do what's best for Link. I don't like the risk involved, and when our attorney says over and over again, basically, I don't recommend.
Well, I can't make any recommendation, and I want to be clear about that. I'm not making any recommendation. I'm telling
Okay,
you
there is
there's
risk, that there is risk in delaying, that there's risk in not taking the money. If we have a problem with how Link is spending the money, that's our job.
We have a fiduciary.
Right? That ends with us. And if the budget was $19 million in 2019 and now it's 31 million, we need a better handle of, okay, we're not spending it on this, or we haven't accomplished the mission that the voters approved and we need to do better. I agree with Joyce that it's gonna cost money to fulfill our obligations, and I have a hard time going back to the voters when they said, yes, we want to support Link and this mission. So to go back and say, we want to save you more money on paying taxes, it just doesn't feel like the right time. With a new CEO coming on board, setting them up for success, the budget already approved, it just doesn't feel like. And I understand we're under the gun because of what the state's doing, which is extremely frustrating. But I don't feel like we can.
I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
I'm gonna last call for comments. So for clarity, is there any action that the board desires to take today before we move on?
just for, just because.
No, you said you were done.
I would make a motion to postpone taking the 1/10 till January 1st of 2025.
There's a motion on the table to delay taking the second 10th until January 2025. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Point of clarification, one of the first items we did today is we approved the agenda. This item is not specifically noted there. I'm all about citizen participation and public input, and there is none on this. Public has not had an opportunity to weigh in on this.
And I will communicate, there were a bunch of people who said, should we be here at this issue? I said, we didn't put it on as an action item.
Not on the agenda.
It's free to come, the board needs to discuss.
So it's a discussion item, which
It was just a discussion item when you modified the agenda?
it wasn't
What?
on there.
Well, you modified the agenda before we approved it.
I modified the agenda to move up
Just
this.
move a
this
couple items.
Okay, but no, not
With,
It's just on as information.
just for discussion.
right, but Counselor, I'd be looking for.
That's what I'm gonna say.
interpretation.
So, you can vote on a motion today. Ideally, you would vote first to, amend the agenda to consider an action item on this discussion point that you can do the day of. You do not have to notice that out. Whether or not a motion, to take this type of action would be the effective means of taking action is the other question. I think you can, make a motion to approve that action for the board to consider a resolution. But this does need to be done by a resolution because it's a policy decision.
So for clarity, if the board so chooses to take action in the form of a motion with the part of that motion to be a resolution crafted
That's
Or-
how you would make it effective.
for a specific
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and you would need to clarify your motion to be very specific about the language of the resolution that would be adopted. So that I have that clarity in drafting.
We have a motion on the table. We have it seconded. Is there further discussion on this motion? Would I guess it would involve pulling back that motion, or do we have to vote on the motion itself? And
Well, you have an active motion that's been seconded, so unless
You can amend some.
you can amend the motion to first amend the agenda.
so the motion maker,
So I would amend my motion to amend the agenda.
So just to be clear, you're amending your motion to amend the agenda to add an action item regarding sales tax. Is that how I correctly understood your motion?
I think that's what I said, right?
And then the second part of your motion is to delay the collection of that sales tax until January 1st, 2025. And direct council to craft a resolution to enact that motion.
Okay.
Is that?
As she said.
Okay.
we're still,
Get that, yes.
would you still second that?
Okay.
So the motion has been amended. There is a second to that. Any further discussion?
So procedurally,
We're doing two
there's a
things.
motion on the floor and there's an amendment on the floor, an amendment to that motion.
The amendment to the motion has been seconded and that the amended motion has 2 points.
So,
The-
so the first call is going to be strictly on amending the agenda to add. the other
No.
motion.
No,
No. it's-
the
that's part A, part
amended
B,
motion has
part C.
2 parts. So
I
it's
I
not procedurally.
I just have a real problem with the lack of transparency. I think it's shameful.
I would agree with you on it. You just lack a lot of transparency in the public that we're.
Is there further discussion? So does everybody understand the amended motion on the table?
We're voting on two things with one vote.
Putting
Yes.
two things with one vote.
Okay.
I would
Which is
suggest
not-
you do a hand vote.
Great, frankly, but. Unless you want to withdraw the original motion, first amend the agenda.
My point of doing this will make it crystal clear how this board stands. And will end all future discussion of which,
It will never be that clear, Randy.
well, at least it gets us a long step that way. So I would like to just go ahead and that way we pretty much put this thing to rest, right?
All right, so we've got, we're clear on what we're voting on. On the amended motion, there's 2 points. So I would.
Yeah.
Alternatively, we can back it out and do it plainly if you wish to do that, Randy.
So to do it cleanly, Mayor Agnew, you would withdraw both motions that are currently pending. Then bring another motion to amend the agenda. If that motion passes, then the second motion.
Do we really need to go through that? When we just amended it? I mean,
This is a little unorthodox to amend the motion to create 2 action items within a single motion. It's not my recommendation to proceed that way.
fair enough, I rescind my motion.
So with that, we're back with no motion on the table. Is there any action that this board wishes to put forward today?
But just
Better get clear, because I'm about ready.
I will make a motion to amend the agenda to take an action on the sales tax.
Is there a second to that?
I will second it.
So there is a motion in a second to amend the agenda to address the sales tax. Everybody clear on that? Is there any further discussion on this motion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented signify with a hand raised. And those that are not in favor of it, similar. What's the count? I'm going to exercise my right to vote. So what did that put us at? But a vote in the affirmative vote in
5 to 5.
5 to 5. So the motion does not.
What about was Mayor Getty on there?
He's not.
No, he left.
Sign back in.
All right, so the motion fails. So we are going to move on. Good discussion. Thank you. All right, next. We are on to item 6.2. RFB 2023-04 tilt-up concrete wall panel joint replacement maintenance stand.
No, we'll get back.
I'm sorry, I guess 6.1, I apologize. Drug and alcohol policy update resolution 2023-11.
Voting contract for everyone weeks.
Oh.
Pretty good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think that's what we lose.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing.
Okay. Here, sorry. That's kind of why I wanted to do this before, but we're going to take a vote on the collective bargaining agreement. Oh, yeah. So before we lose Commissioner Gearing, so with that, I would seek a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the collective bargaining agreement as presented.
I'll second.
Who got the second?
Oh, either one of us.
Like, so it's been moved and seconded to accept the bargaining agreement as presented. In further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Now, we will move on to 6.1, drug and alcohol policy update resolution 2023-11.
So this is actually just really kind of basic and simple housekeeping for our drug and alcohol policy, which we're required to do under the FTA. So this is to get the policy showing what we are currently doing, which we have had a change in our collection site for our drug and alcohol collection. So we used to use Confluence Health and we have changed to NovaWorks. So anywhere in the policy referring to to Confluence now has to be updated to InnovaWorks, which, this is all outlined in the attachment A for anybody that likes to check that out. In addition, another change that is happening is that I was the drug and alcohol program manager for Link Transit and am passing that duty off to Cami Ostrom. And so anywhere where I was referred to as that drug and alcohol program manager, it is updated to Cami. And also adding Cami as a DER, a designated employer representative, so that'll make 3 of us, Lynn, myself, and then Cami. And part of the update of changing to InnovaWorks is also our medical review officer. Referring to the old medical review officer is also updated to show the new one with InnovaWorks. And adding a safety sensitive position of the operations assistant manager, so getting that up to date. And lastly was removing just one statement, referring to an attachment G, which we actually don't have any longer, which was a map. So just removing that. And so those are the changes and updates to that policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Julie? Thank you. Much appreciated. Item 6.2, RFP. I apologize. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that the board adopt resolution 2023-11 to amend Link Transit's drug and alcohol policy.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Just a quick question, kind of Aaron mentioned, how many, do we
Do
still
we
have a quorum?
7?
Yes, we do. 4 to 6.
Okay.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Nick and Sam?
Third time's a charm.
Yes.
In the interest of time, I'm hoping, assuming you guys read a little bit in the action item. Are there any questions about the item? It's an RFP that we are hoping to award to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. We did have one that we had to determine was non-responsive. Were there any questions?
Finance committee did review this and felt comfortable with it, so.
Thank you, Mark.
So with that, is there a motion?
Move to approve resolution 2023-12.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I think this is actually RFP 2023-04.
Okay.
I like it on the wrong. It says 2023. Oh,
You want to go home.
You can do 2 at the same time.
However, that one doesn't work. So I'll change that to 23-04.
I'll second that.
Administrative correction.
Hearing and seeing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. On to our right share policy amendment, resolution 2023-12, Christina and Beth.
I'm gonna make this pretty quick. Since finance committee, we already did discuss these items and got general consensus on it. So Richard already shared a bit about some of the service area discussions that we've been having recently and actually getting that sort of buttoned up. So a reminder that our PTBA boundary does include all of Chelan County, as well as East Montezuma District, Lake Chelan, Arando, and Waterville School Districts in Douglas County. So we had a conversation last month about our ride share service area policy. There were some questions, and so I think we have come as staff now to propose a revision to that policy. So the existing policy as approved states that all groups must start or end in Chelan or Douglas County. So that's the entire 2-county region. What we are proposing moving forward is a revised policy that states that all groups must start and or have at least one passenger located at Link Transit's PTBA boundary that are lines with taxing districts. We would assume that all future groups would align with this revised policy. So these are our current origins and destinations for all of the groups. There is one group that does not fit within that revised policy. So our recommendation is to grandfather that affected group, Cooley City, Mansfield, and Chief Joseph Lena. The way rideshare groups tend to work, you know, they don't usually exist in perpetuity. They kind of morph and change over time. So while this group still exists, we would allow them to continue operating as a Link Transit rideshare. But if that group were to dissolve, then that would just kind of be it. In looking back at the policy, it also required us to update the rate structure. And so the language at the top here does clarify Link Transit's PTBA boundary, and all groups must start and or have at least one passenger located there. And we also clarified some of the rates to reflect the boundary change. And just kind of a clarification item. We discussed this when the rideshare policy was approved, but looking back at some of the materials, it wasn't explicitly called out. So just clarifying that all riders 18 and younger will not have to pay a monthly fee and can ride for free. So, any questions?
And there was a question about the one that's outside, that's Grant County start, and Grant County has a program. They have no vehicles available, so they could not assume them at this point. You know, we said we'll have that conversation. They just don't have, they're out of vehicles as well.
Any questions?
I have no issue with this at all, but I'm just going back to what Richard said at the beginning of the meeting. We can run our operations any way we want.
Yeah, so the CGC you had is perfectly legal. It's a question of what you want to do with it. I think that's the fundamental piece of this. We could do what you approved previously, but the feedback we got was we should pull back to the taxing boundaries, and so that's what we're trying to do.
I understand that, but I think at the time the understanding was that those were our hard boundaries, and it turns out they're not.
Yeah,
Again,
and the
I'm not-
law
I'm
has
not
changed. I think
changing
that's
or argue with.
part of it, is that
Do we really want to limit it now? Is my question.
that's the reason for you. We were trying to be responsive to what we heard.
And I understand that.
And so this time I will do the correct resolution. Move to approve 2023-12.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 2023-12. Any further discussion?
And I might just quickly add that at the finance committee discussion, we looked at the two options, and while there really wasn't a heartburn about either one, we believed that this one is easier to explain to our constituents, that it more closely aligns to our taxing district authority and geography of parts of the of Douglas County that are outside of those taxing authorities right now.
Any other comments? Hearing none, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, appreciate it. All right, rideshare vehicle purchase request.
We'll just stay up here.
Yeah. All right, so again, we started off the program with 10 vehicles to serve as spare. So we do have 8 out on the road, but with 8 vehicles on the road, we are at capacity with our program. Those are just the locations that we have for current waitlisted groups. So we have a group that would be commuting, 2 groups that would essentially be commuting to Cooley Dam. One from East Wenatchee, another one from Wenatchee, and then another group that is interested from Wenatchee to Ephrata. So with not having any vehicles, it is a little hard to expand the program. So we have also kind of put a stop in outreach for the fact that it's kind of just hard to be outreach, like doing outreach and trying to get more people interested in the program when I don't have any vehicles and we don't have an idea of when we'd be able to get any more. So we've kind of put a halt in doing that. But we do have a lot of interest from employers such as Blue Star Growers, Mansing Growers, and we are getting a lot of people who are just calling in and hearing about it. We're seeing the vehicles on the road and asking about the rideshare program and how it works. So we do have a lot of word of mouth interest in the community. So right now, Link Transit would like the approval to purchase up to 20 vehicles this year, so that with a budget impact of up to $1 million. The average vehicle was about 42,000, and we have the approval to purchase up to 10 vehicles up to 50,000. So we were able to stay under that with the other vehicles that we purchased. We also have applied for a grant And we requested 6 vehicles from there. So if we get approved for that, then we would be able to get the funds later this summer. But we do have to go through our procurement process with that, so we really wouldn't know when we'd be able to see vehicles. So we probably wouldn't see vehicles, there's a good chance, until 2024. So requesting and getting the approval to up to 20 vehicles would let us purchase vehicles as needed. So it wouldn't be all at once. It would just be while we're growing the program and seeing if we get approval from the grant, and just trying to grow it slowly, but getting the approval for 20 would let us go ahead and purchase as needed rather than purchasing 5 and then coming back and requesting 5 more. So it would just give staff more flexibility. So this, we could go ahead on if you want.
Oh, sure, yeah, so, and we're not requesting additional funds to do this either, we would reallocate existing approved capital budget to move forward with vehicle purchases.
Randy,
I would make a motion to approve the rideshare vehicle purchase request as presented.
Second.
been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Yes, let's do, move into executive session for the purposes of discussing potential litigation. We need 10 minutes, 15.
I think 10 would be
And would
fine.
be fine.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we convene in the executive session for the purpose of discussing potential litigation in accordance with RCW 42.30.1101 sub I for a period of time not more than 10 minutes.
So to come back at 4:44.
4:44, and note for the record that legal counsel is present.
That motion. Second. And seconded. Any further discussion?
You need to sign out of the.
Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Yeah, but I can't until the vote happens, right?
Oh, okay.